Thanks, Peter, and one of the more unique introductions I've had to a presentation. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Caspin story. Exploring for nickel with benefits is the title of our talk today. And that's my way of saying that we've actually got a polymetallic focus. And as you'll see in our presentation, I actually wonder if we're probably more interested in the benefits rather than the nickel, because that's where most of our recent success has been. So if you recognise that this is obviously a play on the phrase of friends with benefits, we're actually probably more interested in the benefits than the friends, which makes me sound like a real tart. So quick corporate overview. Caspin has been around for coming up to its second year anniversary. We've had a pretty solid share price performance despite the market conditions that's affected everybody. I think we've managed to recover most of our value that was lost during that end of financial year sell-off. And that's primarily because we're reasonably active, generating some great results. Not to mention a very supportive shareholder structure and a highly credentialed board and management team, which I'm sure many of those names will be familiar to people, so I won't go into too much detail. Oh, you would have noticed that Chalice are one of our major shareholders, and I was told that Alex gave us a bit of a plug this morning. So, two projects in the company, and both have a bit of a nickel flavour. Yarrawinda Brook is really our flagship project, and that is, we'll be focusing on some of the recent results that we've been generating from there. But we're also doing some interesting things out at the Mount Squires project out in the West Musgrave, which is a really interesting part of the world, and particularly in recent times. So Yarrawinda Brook. Now, one of the benefits, one of the first benefits, is the proximity of this project to Perth. Would you believe I was out on site this morning? So whilst that's great, I was actually able to go out there and have a meeting this morning and get back in time to make this presentation. I'm afraid I missed this morning's presentations. Peter, did I miss much? No. I didn't miss much. Good. Which is this is the best session. Save the best to last. So Yarrawinda, I think it's one of the more interesting discovery stories in recent times. Obviously, Chalice have, that's the premier probably discovery of the last 2 years in Australia across any commodity. Bearing in mind that some of the gold discoveries of late are probably a little bit earlier than that. We're obviously in the same belt of rocks that Chalice is exploring. We pegged our project about the same period of time a few years ago now, and so we missed the pegging rush that came after the Julimar discovery, which means we've got a great position, premier position in a very prospective area in a hot new, essentially nickel province. With obviously the benefit of being close to Perth and all the associated infrastructure that goes with it. Serradella is our main focus, but there's a number of other prospects within the belt. So Serradella itself, this was a mere twinkle in the eye of the company less than 12 months ago. We initially focused on where some of the previous exploration had gone. It's a tried and true path for many exploration companies. Go to where the most data is, but it isn't always necessarily the best target. We actually had an EM anomaly here at Serradella, which is probably my cue to give Keith Fisk's company NRG a plug. Their X-Site system identified an EM anomaly, which we ummed and ahed about whether it was real or not. Poked a drill hole through it. That was our discovery hole 22, and sure enough, it was mineralisation. And since there, we've been stepping out on these really broad centres, 200 metres by 200 metres roughly, over that's a mag image. Obviously, the whiter areas indicating ultramafic rocks, and that surface generally is where our PGEs are associated. And so we've been stepping out both along strike and down dip, trying to get a feel for what the scale of this system might be. And most recently, we've had our best discovery hit so far. hole 36, 17 metres at 2.33 grams 4E. Now, for those that aren't familiar, or those that missed the chalice talk, we talk in 3 and 4E, so 3E is platinum, palladium and gold, and 4E is platinum, palladium, gold and rhodium, which has been a really interesting little addendum to the story of Cerridella and really differentiates us from some of the other nickel and PGE players that are currently exploring primarily in Western Australia. So rhodium, the most expensive of all the PGEs, it's roughly equivalent to 10 times gold price. So very small amounts, less than 100 ppb, can be quite significant. And rhodium is one of the primary revenue metals for a lot of the South African operations. So it's a big deal, but it's not something we hear about much in Australia. And in fact, I would say that those intercepts you see there, they don't look that much, but they are probably the best rhodium intercepts in Australia ever. So that's an emerging story. Sadly, the rhodium assaying is another separate process after the usual fire assay, so it's something that's only emerged in recent times. But we think that this is something that can really differentiate Yarrawinda Brook and the Cerridella prospect and gives us an interesting point of leverage. So that's kind of what it looks like. Mafic, ultramafic rocks, gently plunging. Hole 36 there you can see is sort of, in hindsight, it was quite obvious that there was going to be some interesting mineralisation. There was a lot of historical drilling here in the past. The exploration history goes back to the 70s and 80s, but it was all very near surface and shallow mineralisation. So we've drilled beneath some of that mineralisation. Hole 18 is one of ours, but for reasons that are yet to be fully understood, actually didn't intercept a wide zone of mineralisation, but that's possibly a bit of late stage stoping from a dolerite. We've also recognised that some of our other drilling hasn't actually penetrated the full thickness of the intrusion. So there's still a long way to go in terms of understanding the continuity of this mineralisation. 200 metres is a long way away, a long distance apart for drilling. You will have seen some of the other explorers probably drilling this sort of style of mineralisation at 40 or 50 metre spacings. Which is probably something that we will come back and do in the next upcoming program. But it's not our only focus. We've also put together an interesting geological model, which I won't go into a huge amount of detail right here, but essentially what we haven't recognised is where is the basal contact for this intrusion. Because that's, typically that's where you'd go exploring for massive sulphides or any kind of settling of any kind of sulphide. And we believe that's further to the northeast or the northern eastern end of the Cerridella prospect where we're currently drilling. Where that contact is exactly, we don't know, but we are seeing that as we step further out or down plunge, we're starting to see these really broad zones of mineralisation over 100 metres thick start to develop. Now, that's half a gram at the moment. It's obviously sub-economic, but we can see rapid changes of tenor in these sort of systems. So any kind of increased tenor towards that basal contact could be a real game changer, and that could be sort of a world-class kind of discovery. And that's sort of the other aspect of our upcoming exploration program. So we're coming into the ultimate sort of field season for Yarrawinda now. We did make a decision to pause drilling during the wet winter months. It really does create problems driving around on wet paddocks. So late October, November is the field season. We'll have quite a large and extensive program of exploration, primarily focused at Cerridella, but we also have a number of other prospects that we've got in the project area, and we'll continue to explore those as we go, and including just doing early stage soil sampling and geophysics to generate new targets, so developing a pipeline of prospects. On the other hand is our Mount Squires project. This couldn't be any more different from Yarrawinda. We're obviously out in the desert. Just recently sort of come back into focus, and we've probably seen all the news of late. Was any of this discussed this morning, Peter? Did Nickel West talk about? No?
I wasn't here.
No? And nobody's here from Oz Minerals? No. So let me just talk on behalf of these companies for a second. I'm sure they don't mind. But so here we are in the West Musgrave. Now, two really interesting sort of developments in recent times. Obviously, everyone's heard that BHP made a bid for Oz Minerals, which was rejected, quite rightly, I think. Most people sort of focus on the copper aspect of production in South Australia, but do not underestimate the value of the West Musgrave project. 30-year, 24 now, year projects for nickel just don't exist around the world that are development ready. And particularly one that produces a very clean con that the West Musgrave will produce from nickel and Babel. So the value of that concentrate is of enormous benefit to any nickel player. And interestingly, the reserves and resources here will put Oz Minerals second on a company perspective behind Nickel West in terms of endowment. So it's probably the most significant sort of nickel development story in Australia for some time. And of course, I think there's probably still plenty to play out in terms of that BHP and Oz Tango. But there we are, right smack bang in the middle of it. I've taken liberties and put our project in amongst Oz's portfolio there. And so you can see that we've got a very strategic holding. It's almost two projects in one, though. We've been doing most of our work on this other interesting polymetallic prospect that we call Duchess, but we do have the other 25 kilometres of that Nebo-Babel trend running onto our project area, and that's was currently part of our exploration focus in the West Musgrave. So this is sort of the things we're doing. We're out there, we're doing a lot of soil sampling. Ultrafines is a godsend in this part of the world where we've got rather shallow, extensive but relatively shallow sand cover, dune cover. So the ultrafine fraction technique works really well. Already our first results from this program are starting to generate some interesting anomalies. We've just flown that corridor with airborne EM. Again, we've used Keith's system, Excite system from NRG. And we hope that this will generate a range of new targets. This area is relatively unexplored for this type of target. So very early stage of exploration, but already starting to yield some results. And as you can see, we've got a drill rig on site. That photo was taken only last week. And what we're actually drilling at the moment, as we speak, is the Duchess prospect, which is an interesting kind of felsic-hosted, well, let's be honest, we don't really know what it is at the moment, but we're generating interesting sort of gold, silver kind of anomalism, as well as copper and molybdenum anomalism or mineralisation, which is something that it's the first time that we've seen these sort of results in this part of the world, which is one of the benefits for going out to the frontiers, is you never know what you might find. And so, why buy a share in Caspin? Because there's a lot going on. We're currently out there drilling at our Mount Squires project, generating some interesting results. We've got a nickel-copper focus, as well as multi-commodity focus there. And then that program will run for about another month, and then we'll almost transition seamlessly into our exploration programs at Yarrawinda, where we've got a new discovery that's wide open, really interesting style of mineralisation, and that program will run pretty much for the next 6 months through the summer season. So we're going to be generating an awful lot of news flow. And I think, Peter, that's good enough reason to buy. Yeah, that's right. And I've left you enough time to tell another joke. Thank you.